I'd like to thank you for coming today and start off by sharing a game that I remember from my childhood. And something in particular is, I remember myself and other kids that I knew being really excited to interact with books even before we knew any words, even before we could read. So notice on the box here in the bottom, maybe left-hand corner in green, it says that no reading skills needed to play. So this game memory, something that I played quite a bit. I just recall as I was learning to read, just remembering sounds and words. And that's kind of like my catapult or my springboard into learning how to read. And now my job and our job here in ELD services is helping students, get matched with books and things and activities that they can use to, kind of compete with cell phones. And I know that's a really tall task because reading isn't always as appealing as cell phones, but today my colleague and I are going to share some tips with you all about maybe how you can get your students a little bit more engaged with books. So if we hop on over to the next slide, our presentation today is with a book in their hands, Literacy Tips for Families, and it is presented by the Twin Rivers Family and Community Engagement Team with us, EL Services, English Learner Services. And again, thank you so much for attending and coming in and joining us this afternoon. So to start, I am Carl Ponzio. I am one of the EL student learning coaches for secondary in particular. You have my contact information there in case you want to learn more about anything that is presented today. So that's my email and my phone number and extension here. And I'll turn it over to my co-host, Angela.
Hello, I'm Angela Lemonager. I'm the program specialist for the EL department. And again, just like with Carl, you have my access information here. Give me a call or an email if you have any questions or would like to chat about anything else. What we're going to be focusing on today is talking a little bit about the purpose for us being here with you this evening. Carl's going to talk to you a little bit about the book that you'll be receiving in December. We have 3 literacy strategies that we'd like to share with you. We'll do a quick review, and then we'll talk a little bit about our next meeting. So the purpose for us being with you here today is we really want to reinforce important skills being taught in school when it comes to reading. Students from grades, TK through 12 are all reading at school every day, and it's really important for us to help encourage them building those skills and also help them learn how to really love reading. It's always a great conversation to be had with your students, learning about what they're interested in. It helps us connect more as parents and as adults with the kids, and it's a fun conversation to have. We're hoping that we can build some connections between our students, our families, and our staff in being together tonight. And our overall goal is that we're working together to instill a lifelong love of reading and learning for our children.
Perfect, thank you. So starting off with the kits and the books that y'all are going to receive, like we said, in December sometime, hopefully sometime soon, you're going to be receiving Lotería by Karla Arenas Valenti. This is a really fun book that we are hoping connects with a lot of the students. For attending today's session, we're going to provide you a copy, and you're going to hopefully get some strategies here today that are going to help have conversations around books, like Angela was mentioning in terms of our purpose here today. We're also wanting to connect with students in terms of what they like to read, because we always find that students are more willing to engage and read when it's about a topic that they like. I know that's probably nothing new, nothing that you haven't heard before, but it really does make a huge difference when the students have some prior knowledge about what it is that they're reading, because they feel like they get it quicker. And we'll talk more about that in terms of the strategies, but definitely really important. And then while these strategies can be used during any portions of the books, or particularly this reader's guide that you have here on the side on the right hand side of your screen. It's best to use them when you're feeling really connected to the characters in the plot. So what I really mean by that is it usually takes a little while that, stuff that we've noticed in terms of our tenure with students or our experience with students is that students kind of need to ramp up and really start feeling comfortable with what's going on in the story or who the characters are, um, before you really start diving into those questions that might need some more critical thinking. But thankfully, we are providing some of those questions that really would maybe get some deeper thoughts going with the students. But again, you really want to make sure that they're comfortable with the book and they know the basics of the book, like who the characters are, what's going on, what's happening, with those characters, what are their lives like before you really dive into these questions. So again, we'll be providing the book as well as a packet of this, including this reader's guide that you see here with these 5 questions and beyond. And also, I mean, you're reading this book together, you're spending time with your student, you're really engaged, and you probably want to have a snack with it. So another thing that you're going to get in those kits that are coming to you soon is, can we get a click? Yes. So one of your characters in the book has, an extra special recipe for some hot chocolate. So you'll be able to do something like really, really engage with the book. So something that kind of happens in the book itself, this special recipe, and you'll get to enjoy it as you're reading. I mean, the weather's perfect for it right now. It's kind of chilly outside today. So you'll have this extra special hot chocolate recipe that you can try as y'all are reading together. So we thought that'd be kind of fun to have, as well as, I mean, Lotería cards. So, I mean, you can't have a book about the game and not get a kit for the game. So we'll also be providing you a kit, with cards and a playing board that mirror what's happening in the book. Just wanted to take a second and try to maybe get some audience participation if you're feeling up to it. Has anyone ever watched a television show or a movie or read a book featuring Loteria before? And feel free to unmute yourselves. And if so, what is that? What story was that? What book was that or movie? Because again, we're trying to build an idea of like what are some other stories that we might be able to bring to our students that like if they really enjoy this, maybe what can teachers be using in the classroom if there's that buy-in. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay. Oh, they play it well. Okay. So, anyone else? Maybe a story, a TV show, a movie, anything else featuring the game? If not, that's okay. All right. Well, if you do have some ideas or if you have something, you're maybe typing it into chat, you don't feel like using your microphone, totally okay. Please, just any ideas about where else we see this game in a story or a book or a movie, just go ahead and put it in the chat. Definitely something we're going to go back and look at because, again, we want to be building that background knowledge. And with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and move on to that first strategy. So the first strategy, reading strategy that you can use at home, we are hoping that it'd be, really accessible for everyone, is called prime time. So it's thinking about connections to the book. So with this book in particular, we know how popular the game can be. So we are hoping that maybe you with your students can tap into experiences with the game and maybe see yourselves in the book itself with the characters. So if we go on to the next slide, so it's prime yourself with prior knowledge. So get yourself ready for reading with any prior knowledge that you can have. And that can start just at the cover, right? We could take a look at the cover and look and notice the cards, right? The cards themselves. Like even asking your student if you recognize the cards or if they recognize the cards, anyone on the cards, or even guessing as to what the cards might be. Because right now we can see the pictures on the cards, but we can't see the identifications on them at the bottom. So really what you want to do with priming yourself is, what do you already know that could relate to the book somehow? And again, starting with that cover picture or the cover of the book is incredibly helpful, because it gets students to start really like thinking about what could the book possibly be about. And once if they see those ideas in motion when they're reading, that's going to create buy-in, and they're going to feel really confident about what it is that they're reading. So one question, I mean, something super straightforward. You could ask, and you might already know the answer, if they've ever played the game before. Um, and something that I thought could be really interesting to have a conversation with a student is, can someone be skilled at the game? Because it's my experience with playing the game, it really seems like it's a lot of chance, right? Like, because cards get pulled and you have to put your pieces on the cards covering them, but it seems pretty random. It doesn't seem like there could be skill, but maybe students really think that skill could play a role. Um, excuse me. And then asking the book, or asking how might um,
It's okay, Carl. We all get excited at times.
better, thank you. Asking about, how might this relate to real life? How might the story, how might the experience relate to real life of playing the game, of having a family event, or having a sleepover where maybe you're playing with friends? Like, how might it relate to real life? Who plays the game? When do you all play? These are just some questions that you can, again, kind of tap into and anticipate what might happen in the book. So based on the title, the cover, anything that they can recognize could be really helpful here. So again, other questions that you could be asking of your student as you all go through the book together could be related to the structure. And this is super important, because when we start asking structure questions, these are the things that can kind of carry over to different books. So beyond the book that you're reading and maybe back to the classroom. So how might this book be broken up? So would it be broken up in maybe sections of the book? Maybe there's seasons, right? So sometimes we have books that are broken up into seasons, like fall, winter, summer, spring. Sometimes books are broken up into chapters. In Lotería, maybe it's broken up by the card titles. Different things are happening in the student's life or in the main character's life that maybe reflect the card titles or the events that are happening. So asking students, like, how might the book be broken up? And they can see that, you know, okay, they might not be right when you ask them this question at first, but if you're maybe asking the same question again as you're moving through the book, they're starting to really think like, okay, well, what has been happening in the story so far? And maybe what might the next chapter title be? I mean, if it's something with the seasons, maybe it's a little bit more straightforward. They know what season's going to come next, but asking them to anticipate is really important. Why might the book be structured the way it is? So again, that's another conversation that you could come back to more than once. And then based on the events in the last chapter, how might this chapter be different? So having them really reflect like what happened in the previous chapter and how is that going to, affect the future events. I think that could be really important. How might things change for the main character? All good things to ask before starting the book. And some of these questions you could even ask in terms of reflection as well. Again, the more time spent engaging in the book and thinking about the book, the better, because the more that they're going to retain. And those are skills and muscles that they need to kind of work in order to kind of move what they're gaining from this text to other texts. I got one more slide for prime yourself. So share aloud any recollections about the previous sections before each reading. So this is kind of that opportunity to review a little bit. And we have some sentence starters here that maybe you could use with your student. In the last part I read, I remember Clara, who's our main character, and you all could talk about what happened to her or where she went, or who she was with, or maybe even how the section of the book ended. Like that could be really helpful in terms of getting ready to read the next chapter or read the next section. Um, Opinion pieces are really important too, because if it's an opinion piece, the student might not necessarily feel like they have to get the right answer. So one part I thought was interesting about the last section was, and that, you know, you can use that, and the student, your student can use that just to have a conversation about what was interesting about the previous section. Okay. Um, I think, I wonder if from the last section, so I wonder if, and that's where you would fill in, I wonder if the, oh, I don't know, the card that Clara drew from the last section will affect the next section. Yes or no, because. So again, filling in that sentence frame, really trying to get an idea about how the past is going to affect the future will prime yourself and your student with ideas that will get them better suited for going farther and moving ahead in the book. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my awesome co-presenter, Angela, for strategy number 2.
Hello, awesome. So I do have a question for you. I would like you to come off mute or type a comment in the chat. When is a time that you can remember being really, really interested or really liking something that you were reading? And maybe what made it enjoyable? So time that you remember really enjoying something that you read and what made it so enjoyable. And then Carl, since I am presenting, would you mind sharing out the chat if there's anything that gets posted in?
I will do my best to translate.
Herberto can translate.
Oh, yeah, the message says that they'll play games where, you know, as far as getting it by rows or you know, completing the game board in this case when it comes to Lotería.
Okay, cool. So no stories about books that you've really enjoyed reading, something that was awesome and fun? Oh man, you got to spend more time with me then. I will help you find something that you love. So then this strategy that I'm going to talk to you about is all about getting your students to really enjoy what it is that they're reading. So when you see your child pick up a book, do they look kind of like this? Are they smiling? Are they focused in the book? Does it look like they want to keep reading? We really want our students to be enjoying what it is that they have in their hands. And so one way to make this happen is to help your student make sure that they're really understanding what's going on in the story. Because once you start getting confused, that's when it starts getting easy to give up and not want to read anymore. And so to encourage our students, we really want to keep them interested and engaged. One thing that we can do if we notice that our student is getting kind of bored or maybe putting the book down, is just to have a conversation with them. There are many reasons why kids decide that they don't want to continue with reading, or maybe they give up reading altogether. And again, a lot of that time is because they don't understand. So these are some questions that you can ask your reader when you notice that they stop paying attention all the way. Just ask them, you know, how often do you pause when you're reading? Maybe they're pausing too much. They're taking too many breaks and then they lose the train of thought, or they lose the idea of what was going on. They forget. Ask them, you know, when you notice that you're getting bored, how do you get yourself back into the book? So maybe you can help them notice a trick that they try to get themselves interested again, and kind of pointing that out and encouraging them to do it more often. Just ask them, why do you think you're not understanding it? And then maybe what is making this book difficult to read? So asking them to take a minute to really think about their decisions and why they are experiencing the book they're experiencing it is going to help them in the future when they choose a new book to read. And we really want them to be thinking about, why don't I like this book? Am I understanding it? Why am I not understanding it? And helping them think about the way that they're thinking about books is one way to help guide their interest and in choosing something different next time.
Good. On in the chat.
Carl?
Oh, yeah. So Angela, there's a really great idea. There's a question in the chat. There can be a goal. There can be like a page goal, or maybe the genre is a big reason why the students are interested in the book. So I think Eddie makes a fantastic, point about genre, and I think setting goals for page numbers can be really helpful as well. So yeah, those are some ideas to definitely keep in mind, and I think that's why we kind of picked the book that we did with Lotería. Like, we were hoping that the genre, or at least the story itself, would keep the reader engaged. And just to kind of piggyback, so just to kind of piggyback on the idea that Angela shared, in terms of like maybe the student, if they are having a hard time, maybe taking too long of pauses, is it maybe too many cell phone breaks? So like having a phone in a different room or in a different area. I know that's helpful for me, so I'll just speak to my own experience, but that can definitely be one thing that you can tap into. Okay, so thinking.
Carl, something happened with your headphones.
Is it better now? Carl, talk.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So thinking about, do you like all kinds of stories? What types of genres are really helpful? What things are your students engaging with? What genre are they really into? Adventure stories? Or are they really into mystery stories? Are they really into, a lot of students I've noticed, especially getting later in my career, they were more interested in nonfiction than fiction, because they would say, oh, well, this is never going to happen, right? They wanted stuff that was closer to real life, maybe not necessarily reading the newspaper, but they were really interested in, something that could be real. So helping them choose different types of materials where that choice is allowed. And I know that some teachers have things like SSR books where the student gets to choose the book rather than it's assigned to them. So when those students have opportunities, taking that time to help them think about, well, what are the types of stories or what are the types of things that they enjoy reading could really go a long way. Easy. Is the story easy? So assure them that it's just as important to read books that are easy. So sometimes students will be like, well, it's too easy. And they're kind of maybe a little bit overconfident about what they're reading, and they're just going through it so fast, page after page after page after page. But it's helpful to read easy stories because that actually builds confidence if you're paying enough attention to it. So not necessarily, dismissing it, but saying like, okay, I really do understand what's going on here, rather than that struggle, which is constant. And then they kind of get frustrated and give up. It's okay to, I would say, take something that's a little bit easier rather than something that's too hard where you're going to give up. Characters, ask them about the characters. The characters are really important because a lot of stories are character driven. So asking them like if they like the person that they're reading about. I mean, sometimes you can have stories where maybe the reader really doesn't like that person. They kind of want to see what happens to them. I think about, stories that are maybe focused on villains or, people who do bad things, and they want to see maybe if it is a villain or somebody who committed a crime, they want to see if the person's going to get caught, right? But more often than not, what I've found is that students want to read about people that they like or people that they identify with in some way. So asking them questions where, about the characters can be very helpful. Last but not least, topics. So ask them about what the stories are about. So again, simply asking them to kind of prime, like we talked about in the last strategy, or just asking them to kind of reflect and summarize. Summarize is really huge. Asking them to summarize what they just read or what they know about the book so far, to have that time to engage with them can be really helpful, because you get an idea not only for what are they remembering, but what are they curious about as well. Because if they're really remembering one specific part, again, if you're reading Lotería together and you're remembering maybe a picture or more than they are, but they're really focused on one part of it, maybe that's something that you as a parent can kind of drive that conversation. You can focus your reading on that topic or on that piece of the story. And that could be your main focus, because you don't have to talk about the entire book. A lot of times students get overwhelmed by the fact that they think they have to know the entire book, rather than maybe just focusing on a part that's really important to them and significant for them. And if we're trying to, going back to the purpose, make lifelong readers, it's important that they're finding something that they can really connect to.
And definitely, I'm reading in the chat that our students really love it when they have awesome pictures, very colorful images to help guide their reading. It definitely does make it more fun and interesting. And action stories are always very exciting. And then I see also a comment that there are books that seem perfect, but also went through mistakes to help make them perfect. That's 100%. And I think that's something very important to remind our students of, so that when they get frustrated, they say it's okay to get frustrated, it's okay to make mistakes, but we push through and then we have something perfect in the end. Yeah, again, there are a lot of pretty pictures about what it's all about. The pictures always help students also keep their interest, but also understand what it is they're reading a little bit more. And then finally, yeah, so when students come across words they don't understand or they can't pronounce, sometimes that gets them frustrated with what they're reading. And it's okay if they have one or two words that they don't understand. One idea for that is to tell them to skip it. Don't let them get stuck on that word. It's not important for students to read every single word independently by itself. As long as they're understanding the basic idea of what's happening, that's still an important thing to do. So if you see your kid getting stuck on a word, it's okay to tell them to skip that word. It's when they're not understanding multiple words in a sentence that we need to take a step back and give them something easier to read. And moving along, we are now at strategy number 3. And I have another question for this very quiet group today. I would love to hear your amazing voices, but I'm wondering what makes a story fun to read, or what makes it fun to be read to? So if somebody's reading you a story, what makes it really fun? So come off mute or type it in the chat. I'll be quiet for a minute, let you think. Excellent. I see a couple of comments in the chat. Herberto, would you be able to translate those for me, pretty please? Oh, go faster, Herberto. Yeah, that you emphasize the comments and the changes of voice when you read to them. and the way that you use voice for certain parts of the story. Okay, awesome. And so the strategy that I'm going to talk about next is all about what you were just saying, is using your voices. So read it how the author tells you to. And for this part, Karla and I are going to read a little bit from a video I'm going to show you. So just listen to the way that we're reading the story. Just listen to how we're reading it. And then you're going to watch a silly video about how the author wanted us to read it. Okay. So I apologize if our sound gets confusing because Karl and I are in the same room. So we'll do our best. So Karl, go ahead and unmute and we'll try it. Okay, so I'm going to read for the son and Karl's going to read for the mom and the dad. And it's going to go up and down. So a blindfold mom, really, is this necessary?
Happy graduation, sweetie.
Oh, I can't believe you got me this car. Ha 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 ha. Amazing. Status update, best day of my life. I'm calling grandma. Grandma, best day of my life.
Should we tell him that? No, let him wear out first.
Jogger, check out my sweet ride. How can you jog when you can drive? Ha 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 ha.
Not yet. He's losing steam. Just let it run its course.
Okay, so not exciting at all to listen to. And that's not how the author wanted us to hear that story. So now we're going to watch a quick video and we're going to hear how different the author wanted us to read the story. It's a silly video and it might be very loud. I don't know if I shared the sound. Okay. There's no sound?
There's no sound.
Well, because nothing can ever go correctly. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. Also, at the end, we have saved time for questions and answers. So along the way, if you have any questions you want us to answer later, go ahead and drop it in the chat and we'll get to those. So let's try the video again.
A blindfold mom, really? Is this necessary?
Happy graduation, sweetie!
I can't believe you got me this car! Amazing! Status update. Best day of my life! I'm calling Grandma. Grandma.
Should we tell him that?
No, let him tell her out first.
Jogger, check out my sweet ride! How can you jog when you can drive?
Not yet. He's losing steam. Just let it run its course.
Marry me right now!
So marrying you right now.
We're getting married!
This is the best day of my life!
Hey, Steve.
Best gift ever!
Love the car.
Best gift ever! Woo! Best gift ever! Yes, best gift ever! Love you guys so much! Hey! Mr. Johnson just stole my car!
Okay, so yes, silly video. When Karl and I read it, boring, we didn't understand how excited this kid was to get this gift that wasn't actually his gift. Parents wanted to give him the little mini fridge. He thought he was getting a car. We didn't get that from when Karl and I read it. But if we would have read it like the author told us to, we would have understood and had more enjoyment reading. So when you're reading along with your kids, point out the punctuation and the words the author uses. The author will always tell you how they want it to sound. So one example would be this first sentence: I can't believe you got me this car. Well, after looking at the video, we see that that was supposed to be excitement. So the exclamation point right here would tell us that I needed to say it like, I can't believe you got me this car. Woo, excited. And then again, this word amazing. Not only will the author give you punctuation marks to tell you how to read it, but sometimes the author will just clearly state that, wait, this person needs to shout that word awesome, not just say awesome. And then finally, jogger, check out my sweet ride. Well, the author meant for us to read it like this, like jogger, he was yelling at him, check out my sweet ride, being totally excited. So really pointing out the use of those words and the punctuation and how it helps your reader really read it the way the author wants to. It also makes it more fun and enjoyable and exciting. You're able to picture better what's happening in the story. Okay, so for this part, as you are reading with your student or your child, and you want to coach them through this strategy, these are some things that you can do to help them out. So you can ask your reader to, you can point out the punctuation and ask them to reread it. You can ask your reader what it sounds like to, if the author said he shouted or he whispered, have your child practice using that word and then reread it. You can ask them what's happening with the characters. You know, should that character be really quiet right now, or should that character be really loud right now? Another thing that you can do is model for them. So repeat the way that your child just read it for them, and then ask them, you know, do you think it was supposed to sound that way? Or here, let me read it for you. Does this sound the same way that you read it? Which one do we think is more accurate? So these are just some different ways that you can help your reader read the way the author told them to. And I'm going to turn it over to Carl.
Perfect. And we got a question in the chat, Angela, and maybe we can work on this one together. So a question in the chat was about if as a district or as a school, do we have the opportunity to make books or purchase books in dual languages like Russian and English? So to my knowledge right now, I know that there are some libraries where we have some books with that would be bilingual books. And I know that our ultimate goal is reclassifying students as quickly as possible. So making sure that we're trying to engage them as much primarily in English as possible. I understand that we definitely want to have them feel comfortable by tapping into their first language, if that's Russian or Spanish, or any of their first languages. But ultimately our goal being, you know, most of their reading, at least in the classroom, done in English. Can you say more to that?
Yes. So classroom libraries probably don't contain a whole lot of dual language books. We would love that to be more, but it just isn't right now. However, the school libraries, they should have access to stories that are told in their home languages as well. The public library is a great place. Twin Rivers students automatically have library cards. Heriberto, we had a slide previous training. Is that something I could share with you and you can send out to people who are here?
Yes, families that have registered typically get the presentation, and we will follow up and send any information to them afterward.
Okay, awesome. There are multiple websites that we have that we can share with you to where you can get digital copies of stories that are translated in very many languages. Sometimes they'll be dual languages, Russian and English side by side. Sometimes they will just be told in one language. Does that help answer the question, or did I get?
Looking at the chat now, it looks like the gentleman also means like curriculum books, not just literature. And to that, I would again suggest that no, it's mainly going to be in English. That we're not going to have, like, for example, like if they're in a history class, we're not going to have a copy of that textbook in, you know, Russian or Spanish for them to check out, because the instruction is mainly meant to be given in English. Is that correct, Angela?
Yes. When students over rely on the home language, it slows their ability to access or to, acquire the English language. And so the language of school happens to be in English. Majority of what the students are going to get in the classrooms is going to be in English. Teachers will sometimes translate pieces for students, but it's generally not something that's recommended.
Right. Hopefully that answers the question. And I see that, there's definitely that opportunity for, notes and other things that, students do get from their teachers sometimes, if it's instructions or if it's things, to help them along in the lessons. Definitely there's that possibility, but the majority of the curriculum is going to be given in English. So
And
again, thank you for that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we only have a couple more slides. So why don't we go ahead and finish? We're just about to summarize our strategies. And then after that, we'll be here to answer questions. So we can talk to you more about this, definitely.
Yeah,
But
thank
for
you.
now, let's go ahead and.
Will do. So a quick review of what we've gone over today. So that first strategy, prime time, is where you're going to want to ask your students, your awesome lifelong readers. So those questions at the beginning of each session of reading, things like, does this remind them of something that they know about? Why do you think the story is written this way? So again, that's going back to the structure and things that they can carry over from reading to reading, from book to books, and not just that one particular book, but maybe books that they might encounter or stories they might encounter in school. And what happened in the last section of the story, or the last time that y'all read the story together. So getting that recall, right? Trying to remember and bring the ideas from the last chapter into this next reading. So having that little time of review is going to be really helpful. And then we talked about, you've got to get it. That was our second strategy. And again, we're asking readers these good questions. That first one, what is making you pause your reading? So if they're not getting it as well as they could, what's kind of stopping them? What road bump is there? What's getting in their way? And if it's a physical distraction like a cell phone, maybe that's something that can be moved into another room or turned off. But asking your reader, well, what's giving you trouble? What's getting in the way? What's making you pause? Next one there, why do you think this is difficult for you? So having the student kind of diagnose or think about, what is the challenge? Maybe it is something like vocabulary. And like Angela said earlier, students don't have to know every single word. If they're being tripped up by multiple words in a row in the same sentence, then yeah, that can make comprehension really difficult. But trying to help them think about why they're having trouble. We talked about the characters. Do they like the characters? So having them kind of determine whether or not they like the person that they're reading about, that could have a really big impact. Last but not least there, does your student like the topic about what they're reading? The topic of what they're reading, that's going to be really important as well, because if they don't find the topic interesting, they're probably going to want to put the book down, right? And maybe not pick it back up. So you've got to get it. And then the last one, the one that we just talked about, is read it like the author tells you. We had some great anticipation from the audience there, right? Like y'all had an idea about what was coming, and you knew that pronunciation and the way that you read something is important. You tap into things like punctuation. What does that tell you? So making sure that we're doing those full stops, that we're using those exclamation points to really, know and recognize how the author wanted us to read it, so we can kind of get a better understanding. Recognizing what words the author is using, because a lot of times authors are very intentional about the words that they use. We see that a lot in poetry, right? We see that in poetry all the time. Almost every word matters. That happens in literature, other readings as well. And then, does it sound the same when I read it? So if the students aren't reading it using those things, using the punctuation and the grammar, maybe they're missing out. So making sure that you are, kind of helping them through it by recognizing those things that we just talked about, the punctuation, the grammar, having you read it, and then allowing them that time to think about and recognize, how is it different? What are they missing out on? And how should they be reading it?
All right, I wasn't sure if I was unmuted. And anytime that we present information to you, we always base it on research. And so I just wanted to share with you that the strategies we presented to you this evening were taken from Jennifer Saravallo's book, the Reading Strategies book. So we didn't make these up. They are research proven and brought to you by us for today. Next session, Carl.
Yeah, so just a quick preview of what we're going to be talking about next time we're together. Hopefully, you'll join us on January 18th in the new year to talk about the LPAC, the English Language Proficiency Assessments for California. So, this is the really big test that all English learners take every year until they're, redesignated, they're reclassified as proficient in academic English. So, Angela, if you could go ahead and tap the slideshow for me? Yeah, so we'll talk about basic information about the LPAC. When is it given? What the process is, things like that. We'll talk about scoring for the LPAC. What does it look like when the scoring is done? After we get all the tests taken, and when can you kind of expect those results? And that can kind of be we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it then. But when can you get those results is going to be, kind of dependent on the state because the state scores part of it. And then ways to help your students prepare for the LPAC. I think that one's going to be really important. So, of course, they're getting things in the classroom and they're, doing things like reading with you. But then what are some other strategies? So we'll talk about that all next time on the January 18th, and that will definitely be time for you to use those strategies that we present to you to again help your students get prepared. So definitely in time for you to be ready. And then we definitely just wanted to again say thank you, and we do have some Q&A time coming up here, but we wanted to thank you for coming today or for joining us on this Zoom meeting. Again, I'm Carl Ponzio. I'm one of the EL student learning coaches here, mainly with secondary, and you have my contact information there.
And I'm Angela Lemonager, the program specialist, and you can contact me anytime. Thank you for coming. We know it's difficult sometimes to step away. So feel free to hop off or stay to ask questions. We really appreciate everybody that participated in the chat tonight. It was great to hear your voices or read your voices, I suppose I should say. So thank you again. And yeah, let us know if you have questions.